On the bridge of the ESS Retribution, Captain Lena Tanaka gripped the arm of her command chair as the distress call played over the comm, the desperate voice of the Telvian ship master crackling with static. To any Earth Empire vessels in range, this is the passenger liner Celestial Dream. We are under attack by Gray Zone raiders and have sustained heavy damage. They're boarding us, our security is overwhelmed, they're taking prisoners. Please, send help. Repeat, we are. The transmission cut to agonized screams and cruel, barking laughter. Lena silenced the comm with a sharp gesture, jaw clenched. She turned to her XO, Commander Zach Reynolds. Status? We're the only Empire ship close enough to make a difference, Zach replied grimly. The Telvians are struggling to mobilize after the loss of their outer colonies. It's a damn massacre out there. Then it's up to us. Helm, intercept course, full burn. Tactical, combat alert. Lena sliced a hand across her throat. This ends now. I'm done letting these butchers run wild on our borders. The Retribution's engines surged, the ship leaping to warp, while her crew scrambled to battle stations with tight, determined faces. Trillions of kilometers away, smoke belched and alarms wailed as the stricken Celestial Dream shuddered under the onslaught of pirate boarding craft disgorging hulking armored forms with cold, merciless eyes. The screaming of innocence echoed through once grand halls. On board the liner, we're introduced to Yaron, a young Telvin engineer, frantically searching for his sister Enra amidst the chaos. He's lived a life of comfort and peace until now, ill-prepared for the savagery of the pirate assault. Yaron sees passengers gunned down in front of him as he desperately calls Enra's name. The grisly sights and his helpless fear are visceral. He glimpses Enra being dragged away by a cackling raider, a bruise darkening her terrified face, and he's seized by fury and desperation. He snatches up a wrench and charges towards them with a cry. A meaty fist takes him in the temple, stars exploding across his vision. He crumples, reaching towards Enra's distant scream as unconsciousness claims him. Intercut with Yaron, we follow Sergeant Zach Reynolds as he leads a crack squad of Empire commandos in a desperate boarding action to halt the pirate attack. They blast through the Celestial Dream's ravaged interior in tense, methodical breaches, putting down the raiders with precise brutality. But it's too little, too late. The pirates are dragging crates of plunder and crowds of shell-shocked captives back to their ships. Zack catches sight of a Telvian girl with a bruised face being hauled past, her eyes wide and pleading. His heart clenches as he surges forward. His fingers brush her outstretched hand, but a pirate drives an armored boot into his chest, sending him crashing back. The pirate ship's airlock slams shut, muffling the prisoner's wails. Zack pounds his fist helplessly against the unyielding metal as the ship detaches from the liner. Through a viewport, he sees the girl mouthing a desperate plea, tears streaming down her face. Then the raider craft blasts away into the void. Zack looks around at the ravaged interior of the once proud liner, strewn with bodies and wreckage, the acrid scent of pulse rifle ozone mingling with the coppery tang of spilled blood. Flames lick at ruptured bulkheads while alarms blare futilely. The few surviving passengers left behind stagger past in a daze or huddle in corners, weeping. Hardened as he is, the sight hits Zack like a punch to the gut. This isn't a battlefield, it's a charnel house. And the pirates got away with hundreds of prisoners. Hundreds of lives he failed to save, condemned to a fate worse than death. He barely feels the bulkhead as he slumps against it, eyes staring blankly at the devastation, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The guilt is a lead weight in his chest. How can he call himself a soldier, a protector, when he's failed so utterly to protect the innocent? When all his training and dedication is powerless against such cruelty? How will he live with the knowledge that his best wasn't good enough? His squad finds him there. They pull him to his feet, their faces haunted beneath the spattered grime and blood. No words are exchanged, no words are sufficient. They lead the survivors to the escape pods in heavy silence and watch numbly as the once grand ship splits apart into drifting embers. Lena barely holds her diplomatic composure as the Telvian ambassador decries the Empire's failure to protect Telvian space. Zack's hands clench white-knuckled as they are forced to relive those harrowing moments aboard the Celestial Dream. The Council finally agrees to dispatch the Retribution and her advanced stealth frigate, the ES Spectre, on a covert search and rescue operation to locate the pirate stronghold and free the captives. It's made abundantly clear that this is as much about politics as saving lives. The Empire needs a win to shore up galactic public opinion. Failure will mean not just the loss of the prisoners, but potentially war between the Empire and the Confederacy. The stakes couldn't be higher. Captain Lena Tanaka stood at rigid attention before the Galactic Council, jaw set like steel as she endured the Telvian ambassador's tirade. Hundreds of our citizens were taken by those butchers while your ship dawdled, the ambassador seethed, his pale eyes flashing. The Earth Empire swore to defend our borders, yet our people are dragged screaming into the grey while you twiddle your thumbs. If humanity considers us such trivial allies, perhaps it is time to reconsider our arrangements. We're not your private fleet, Lena shot back through gritted teeth, niceties fraying. If you hadn't mothballed half your ships to curry favor with us, maybe. Enough, the council overseer barked, leaning forward at his podium and glowering down at them. The Earth Empire will clean up this mess. He pointed to a star map showing the drifting wreckage of the Celestial Dream in a far quadrant. We're tasking the Retribution to track the raiders back to their base and liberate our people. He fell back with a sour twist to his mouth as if the words were bitter. We all know the gray zone has become far too troublesome of late. It's time the Empire reminded them that lawlessness at our frontier will no longer be tolerated. What you suggest would mean war, the Telvian ambassador said, aghast. The Confederacy has no desire for open conflict with the gray zone cartels and petty kingdoms. We barely held them at bay before. You'll do as we say, the overseer snapped coldly. Or the Earth Empire will happily extend its protectorate deeper into Telvian space. For your own good. The Telvian ambassador glared daggers but fell silent, knowing a threat when he heard one. He was impotent and he knew it. Lena held back a disgusted sneer. Politics. Sergeant Zach Reynolds stood beside Lena, a muscle ticking in his stone-carved jaw, the only sign of the fury boiling in him as he listened to the self-important blowhards deciding the fate of innocent lives as if they were just numbers on a screen. His mind flashed to the desperate, tear-streaked face of the captive Telvian girl. What horrors was she enduring while they argued and postured? His hands curled unconsciously into fists. He'd failed her, failed all of the captives. He'd been too slow, too careful. He should have blasted every pirate to smears the moment he'd seen them dragging prisoners, consequences be damned. What good was his training, his dedication, if he couldn't even protect the innocent? The overseer turned to Lena, his expression grave. This is more than a rescue operation. We need you to send a message, Captain. A reminder of why the Empire's justice is feared. His eyes flashed coldly. No prisoners. Not this time. Lena felt a chill slither down her spine but she nodded curtly. Understood, sir. I'll have my ship prepped to leave within the hour. We'll get our people back. She turned to Zack as they strode from the council chamber, her face hardening into iron determination. Assemble your teams and brief them. When we find that pirate base, we'll burn it to the ground. We'll bring our people home, and may whatever gods they believe in have mercy on those bastards, because we won't. Zack met her eyes, his own dark with barely leashed wrath and pain. They'll pay for what they've done, he promised in a growl. Every scream, every torn family, I'll carve the price out of their damned hides myself if I have to. Lena gripped his armored shoulder, sharing in his cold fury. You'll have your chance. They boarded the Retribution and watched the blue-green swirl of the Empire capital fall away behind them, replaced by the hard gleam of stars. The ship wasn't just a home, it was an instrument of justice. And now it hunted. The Retribution and the Spectre skimmed the edge of the gray zone, a vast lawless expanse where petty tyrants and pirate kings reign over a constantly shifting patchwork of territories beyond the borders of the great powers. Lena and her crew scour the wreckage of the Celestial Dream, looking for any clue to where the raiders originated from. Meanwhile, Zack drills his combat teams relentlessly, pushing them to the edge of endurance. He's driven by a gnawing guilt and simmering rage, haunted by his failure aboard the Dream. He'll be damned if he's too slow again. He nearly breaks a rookie's arm in a bout when his control slips. Lena pulls him aside, sensing him teetering on the edge. She reminds him that he'll be no good to the captives if he burns himself out or loses sight of who he is. They need the wrath, but they also need the discipline and clear thought. Zack takes a shuddering breath, mastering himself. She's right, as much as the fury screams at him. Lena holds his gaze, seeing the pain and self-recrimination. She knows that burden all too well. They clasp hands, united in their grim purpose. On the Retribution's gleaming training deck, Zack slammed a rookie Marine to the mat with a snarl, sweat streaming down his face. The rookie scrabbled frantically at Zack's chokehold, eyes wide with fear, but the sergeant only bore down harder. Not good enough, he barked, a sharp buzz echoing as the rookie slapped out. Too slow. Do you think the enemy will go easy? Do you think they'll hesitate to snap your neck? He released the gasping Marine with a disgusted shove. On your feet, he roared at the gathered Marines watching with tight faces. Run it again. I'll drill you maggots till your bones turn to jelly if that's what it takes. We will not fail again. The Marines leapt to obey, falling back into formation with tired determination. They knew what was at stake. Any less than perfection would mean more innocence lost to gray zone depredations. Zack turned away, shoulders heaving as he caught his breath. His eyes fell on the image of the captive Telvian girl, her desperate, pleading face frozen on a training screen. He'd pulled it from his suit chem footage, a reminder of his failure. Of the lives riding on him. He jabbed a finger at the assembled Marines, voice hard as steel. Look at her face. Sear it into your minds. She's out there, waiting for us. They all are. Their lives are on you. Zack. He turned at Lena's gentle touch on his shoulder, the rage and self-recrimination still boiling in his eyes. She held his gaze steadily, her own dark with shared pain and understanding. It's not your fault, she said softly. You did everything you could. It wasn't enough, he snarled, slamming a fist into his palm. I was too slow, too careful. I failed them, Lena. She shook her head firmly. You didn't fail anyone. The failure belongs to the Council, the Empire. To everyone who let the gray zone fester for so long. Her hand tightened on his shoulder. We'll make it right. We'll bring them back. But I need you clear and sharp for that, not half mad with guilt and fury. Zack closed his eyes, visibly wrestling his demons. When he opened them again, the rage had cooled to a hard, crystalline purpose. You'll have it, Captain, he said tightly. We'll burn the bastards to cinders. His jaw flexed. But we'll do it smart. She smiled grimly and clapped his armored shoulder. That's my sergeant. Now finish whipping these puppies into shape. We can't be more than a day out from the base now. Zack turned back to his Marines, a calm, controlled wrath etching his face to stone. They looked to him with trust, ready to leap into hell itself at his word. He would not fail them. He would not fail her, the girl whose face haunted him. They would drown the stars in blood to bring her and all the captives home. The Retribution knifed through the void, a predator's growl building in its engines, hungry for the kill to come. We find Euron waking up in a cage, surrounded by the groans and weeping of his fellow captives. Numb with horror, he searches desperately for Enra. He starved and worked to exhaustion in the mines, all while fearing for his sister. We follow Enra as she's thrown into a nightmarish new reality, surrounded by the constant threat of abuse and death from the sneering pirate overseers. She's forced to work grueling shifts in the mines, watching other captives beaten and executed for imagined infractions. Enra hides the increasing pain from an infected wound, knowing that to show weakness is a death sentence. She and Euron dream of rescue or escape, clinging to fragile hope. Euron came awake with a gasp, instinctively reaching for Enra. His sister's name died on his lips as the nightmare solidified into reality. He wasn't in his bunk on the celestial dream. He was lying on hard, cold metal, the reek of unwashed bodies and despair clogging his nose. He pushed himself up on shaking arms, his head pounding. He was in a cage, barely tall enough to stand in, packed in with dozens of other frightened, weeping captives. More cages stretched as far as he could see in the cavernous chamber, stacked atop each other like some mad honeycomb. "Enra," he shouted, gripping the bars. "Enra, where are you?" "Quiet, maggot." A shock baton slammed into the cage, electricity crackling. Euron reeled back with a cry. A hulking gray zone pirate in crude armor leered at him through the bars, yellow teeth bared in a cruel grin. "No talking. You all belong to us now." The pirate moved on, jabbing the baton at other cages, laughing at the screams and sobs. Euron pushed down the bile surging up his throat. This couldn't be happening. It had to be some terrible dream. But the pain was too real, the stench too visceral. He'd failed Enra. He'd failed everyone. A commotion at the front of the chamber drew his attention. Pirates were dragging captives out of the cages, beating them into a ragged line with curses and blows. Euron caught a glimpse of Enra's terrified face in the group before she was swallowed by the pressing crush of bodies. "Move, scum," the pirates roared, brandishing shock staffs and force whips. "Into the mines. Time to earn your keep." The captives were herded out of the chamber and into a dark tunnel, the thud of their bare feet and the cries of the wounded echoing off the cold stone. Euron stumbled along in a daze of dread, barely feeling the jabs and blows of the guards. The tunnel opened into a vast cavern, the walls glittering with seams of precious metal. Dozens of other tunnels branched off into the depths of the asteroid. Already hundreds of haggard slaves toiled here under the cold glare of floodlights, the clangor of drills and picks mingling with the ever-present groans of misery. "Here's the new meat," a one-eyed pirate overseer bellowed, shoving the newcomers forward. "Grab a tool and get to work. You don't make quota, you don't eat." Euron found himself holding a heavy pry bar, numb fingers clutching the cold metal. He scanned the despairing faces around him for Enra, but teeming chaos made it impossible. A pirate cracked a lash across his shoulders, sending him staggering with a shout of pain. "Get moving. The cauldron hungers, and you will feed it." Euron joined the broken line of diggers scraping a meager existence from the bowels of the asteroid, despair a lead weight in his chest. There would be no rescue from this hell. No escape. Only the grim fight to survive, to endure. How long until the cauldron consumed them all? Enra gritted her teeth against a scream as the force pick jerked in her torn hands, metal shards lacerating her palms. The infected wound in her leg throbbed, hot tendrils of agony threading through her flesh. Every stroke threatened to send her crashing to her knees, but she pushed on. To fall was to die. The charnel reek of the corpse trench at the edge of the chamber promised that. And she couldn't abandon Euron to this hell alone. She had to endure. Endure the pain, the exhaustion, the despair devouring her in dismal bites. Her existence had narrowed to the screech of her pick, the burn of her lungs, the growl of the pirate overseers stalking the tunnels hungry for any sign of weakness. A scream rang out nearby, the sound horribly familiar after days or weeks in this pit. She forced herself not to look. Not to see the pleading face, the pirate's leering grin, the flash of a blade or the gout of blood. Another soul fallen to the cauldron. She'd torn her nails bloody clawing at the unyielding stone of her cage that first eternal night, screaming for Euron until her throat was raw. Only the echo of weeping and supplications to distant gods had answered. Now even the tears had dried to bitter salt on her cheeks, washed away by the grime and sweat of ceaseless toil. The numbness frightened her. How long until she became truly a soulless husk, dead but for the endless picking and scraping? But sometimes she glimpsed Euron across the chamber, bowed under the weight of the prybar and his own suffering, and the spark of defiance flared anew. She couldn't give up. Wouldn't. Somehow they would escape this nightmare. Get back to the gentle green hills and whispering rivers of Telvin, away from the blood and smoke and endless screaming. A pirate's gnarled hand seized her hair, wrenching her head back. She gasped, fear lancing through the fog of exhaustion. "You're falling behind, pretty," he said, reeking breath hot on her neck. The keen edge of a knife caressed her cheek. "Gonna have to motivate you proper." Enra cringed, bracing for the pain. The pirate chuckled darkly, then paused, studying her with a cruel intensity that turned her bowels to water. "So soft," he crooned, fingers digging into her scalp. "Wasted on the cauldron. Bet the boss would pay shiny for a sweet thing like you in his bed." No," Enra whispered through numb lips. "Death would be better, infinitely better." A thunderous boom shuddered through the tunnels, staggering slave and pirate alike. Dust sifted from the ceiling as shouts of alarm echoed from the upper levels. The pirate released Enra, seizing his crackling shock baton. "Back to work," he bellowed at the cringing slaves. "Rest of you with me. We got trouble." He loped off with a group of guards, heavy boots pounding the stone. Enra sagged against the wall, energy bleeding from her in a rush. Another distant explosion vibrated through the rock. Pops of small arms fire stitched the sounds of chaos. Panicked shouts bounced down the tunnels. Escape. It was the only explanation. Someone was assaulting the pirate base. Enra exchanged a wild glance with Euron across the cavern, his face a mask of desperate hope. Had the Earth Empire actually come for them, dared the lawless depths of the Grey Zone? Or was it a rival pirate clan, drawn by the scent of blood in the stellar seas? She stumbled toward her brother on unsteady legs, daring to believe, daring to hope. Whoever had come, they had nothing to lose. Only their chains. The captive's desperation turns to fragile hope as the sounds of battle rage through the pirate base far above. The guards become distracted and vicious, some abandoning their posts while others seem determined to work the slaves to death before the end. Euron and Enra find each other in the chaos, clinging to each other even as the pirates try to force them apart. When the guards are down to a skeleton crew, the captives, led by the siblings, seize the chance and overpower them in a frantic melee. They arm themselves with the guards' weapons and mining tools and surge up into the base at large, seeking escape or at least a quick death in battle compared to the slow doom of the mines. They emerge into a scene of utter devastation, smoke, bodies, and shattered stone everywhere. Fierce fighting still rages in pockets, but it's clear the pirates are losing. Shouts echo of a suicide run and reactor breach. Euron and Enra keep the other captives together, hope and dread warring as they make for the nearest hangar bay, praying to find a ship. All around them is chaos as pirates flee or turn to bitter holdouts. Just as they reach the hangar gates, they run headlong into a squad of Earth Empire Marines led by a grim-faced Sergeant Zach Reynolds. For a moment captives and rescuers just stare at each other in shock. Then Zach sees the face that has haunted his nightmares for weeks, the desperate Telvian girl crying out for rescue, and maskless, helmetless, he steps forward as if in a dream. You came for us," Enra said through cracked lips, voice rusty with disuse. Tears carved tracks through the grime on her face. "Bless you. Bless you." Zach pulled her into a fierce embrace, as if he could crush the horror of the past weeks between them. "I'm sorry," he whispered brokenly. "I'm so sorry it took us so long." She sagged against him, barely able to stand. He held her up easily, armored form hard and unyielding. Around them the other captives wept or stared with glassy shock as the Marines handed out water bottles and ration packs. "Sergeant," one of the Marines shouted. "Hangars clear. We've secured a transport, but this rock is coming apart. Everyone to the ship." Zack bellowed, slinging Enra over his shoulder in a fireman's carry as she finally lost consciousness. "Go go go." Staggering under their loads, the Marines double-timed it up the waiting ramp. Zack saw Yaron beside him, face slack with exhaustion and relief as he dragged another hobbling captive along. The ship lifted in a roar of thrusters as soon as they were aboard, the hangar collapsing around them. Proximity alarms howled. "Retribution, this is Valkyrie 1. The pilot's voice crackled over the comm, "We have the package but the whole damn base is going up. Massive reactor breach. Tell the captain to clear the blast zone. Get us out of here, Valkyrie 1, Lena's voice came back, hard as diamond. All ships fall back. The Spectre has their bomber wing ready to finish this. Zack stumbled into a seat, Enra draped across his lap. Yaron collapsed next to him as the ship shuddered and leapt for open space. Through the viewports, the pirate base swelled into a miniature sun, then a roiling, livid bruise against the stars as the Spectre's torp struck home. And then there was silence, achingly, blessedly still. Zack stared at the girl lying broken in his arms and sent a wordless plea to whatever distant power might still be listening. "Medic," he croaked, as darkness swallowed him down into a bottomless well. "She needs." They weren't out of hell yet. But at least they were pointed the right way. The sterile white corridors of the Retribution's sickbay seemed to stretch into infinity as Zack paced, nerve-stretched wire-taut. The cries of the wounded and the acrid scent of antiseptic chased him, a grim mirror of the cauldron's charnel stench. Enra had disappeared behind those doors hours ago, limp and dull-fragile on a stretcher. Yaron had gone with her, refusing all treatment until she was tended to. Since then, nothing. No word, no whisper. Zack's emotions were a roiling tempest, relief, fear, wrath. They had saved the captives, yes. Him and his team, pulling off the impossible. The pirate base was a gutted ruin, spilled into the void. But the misery, the savagery they had witnessed down in those mines, the scars both physical and mental that would never heal clean. It ignited a low, seething fury in his chest. Death had been too easy for those slavers, too quick. They should have suffered as their victims suffered, should have had every scream and wail revisited upon their own flesh. His nails bit into his palms as his fists clenched. He had failed Enra once, failed all those wretched souls in the cauldron. Never again. He would scour the gray zone clean, even if he had to glass every pirate stronghold from here to the rim. He wouldn't stop until... A gentle hand on his shoulder jolted him out of his black reverie. He turned to see Lena, still in her battle dress uniform, fatigue and sorrow etched into her face. "How is she?" he asked hoarsely. "The girl. Enra. Doc hasn't told me a thing." Lena sighed deeply. "Alive. Stable, or so they say. But Zack, the things those bastards did to her, to all of them." He pulled away, a snarl twisting his lips. "We should have made them pay. Should have worked them over nice and slow before spacing them. They're dead," Lena said flatly. "Every last stinking one of them. That's what matters. It's not enough." Zack slammed a fist against the bulkhead, relishing the bright flare of pain. "It's not enough," he repeated brokenly. Lena folded him into her arms, heedless of the hard battle steel. "I know. Believe me, I know. But we have to be better than them, Zack. We have to." He shuddered against her, tears leaking hot and tight behind his eyes. "What if we can't?" he whispered. "What if this is just the beginning?" She had no answer for that, and he was glad of it. Platitudes would not balm the seeping wound in his soul. They parted at a discreet cough, turning to find Yaron hovering, pale and drawn. The young Telvian swallowed hard, Adam's apple bobbing. She's asking for you, he said to Zack, voice thready. Enra. I don't know what to tell her. Zack crossed to him in quick strides, gripping his shoulder. You tell her she's safe, he said fiercely. You tell her it's over, and she's going home. You got that? Euron gave a jerky nod, swiping at his eyes. I think it will take a long time. For any of us to feel safe again. The awful truth of that echoed in the marrow of Zack's bones. We'll get you there. I promise. Whatever it takes. He followed Euron into the hushed confines of the sickbay, bracing himself for what was to come. Enra lay on the crisp sheets, still and pale as a doll against the sterile white. Tubes and wires snaked from her battered form, nutrients and fluids dripping steadily. One of her eyes was swaddled in gauze, her head wrapped in heavy bandaging. But her other eye was open, tawny iris vivid against the bloodshot sclera. It widened at the sight of him, and her hand twitched weakly against the coverlet. Zack crossed to her in a daze, sinking to his knees beside the bed. Hey, he said inanely, throat tight and aching. I'm so. Enra's fingers brushed his, cold and dry as old paper. I knew, she whispered, voice thin and thready as spider silk. I knew you would come. The simple faith, unwarranted, undeserved, shattered him like a hammer blow. I'm sorry, he choked out, bowing his head over their clasped hands. I'm so damn sorry. I should have been faster, should have. You came. You and the others. That's all that matters. Tears carved hot tracks down his face, salt stinging his cracked lips. Words eluded him, great clumsy ineffectual things, so he simply clung to her, anchoring her to this moment, this place. They stayed that way for a long time, the soldier and the girl, broken and healing in equal measure. Euron hovered at the periphery, unwilling to intrude but loath to leave his sister's side. When Enra drifted back into the haze of sedation and painkillers, Zack lowered her hand to the coverlet. He rose on unsteady legs, joints popping. Lena waited in the passageway, face soft with understanding. He braced for judgment, for ridicule, but she merely stepped forward and enfolded him in a crushing embrace. We did good today, she murmured fiercely into his ear. We did good. Remember that. He held her like a drowning man, like she was the only solid thing in a universe of smoke and fury. We're not done, he said as they finally parted. Not by a long damn hyperlane. The gray zone is still out there. More animals like this. We have to. We will, Lena said, steel in her eyes, in the set of her jaw. Wherever they are, however long it takes. The retribution will find them. She keyed the comm link on her wrist. Bridge, this is the captain. Set course for the Aleph corridor. We have work to do. Zack stared out the viewport as the ship came about, the stars smearing into shimmering lines as they leapt to faster-than-light velocity. We're coming, he whispered to those cold, distant sparks. And hell is coming with us. The Retribution and her crew throw themselves into a crusade against the Grey Zone slavers and pirates, hunting them down one by one. They liberate captives and hound the warlords across a dozen star systems. Enra and the other prisoners begin the long, slow process of healing, physical and mental. Euron takes a posting on the Retribution to stay close to her, and to join the fight against those who tore apart their lives. But it soon becomes clear that the cancer of the Grey Zone is too deep, too widespread, to be excised by one ship alone. For every base they burn, every raider they kill, 3 more rise. Whispers spread of a new pirate king rising to unite the clans, whispers of dark experiments and forbidden tech that could bring the galaxy to its knees. Zack, Lena, and the crew are stretched to the breaking point, exhausted in body and soul but unable to slow their headlong pace. They know too intimately the cost of failure. But even driven by righteous wrath, how long can they endure on this road before it burns them to ash? The story ends on an ominous note, with the Retribution dispatched to investigate rumors of a secret pirate shipyard hidden in the storm-racked depths of the Antares Nebula. A place where ships have ventured and never returned. But they will go, because they must, because the alternative is unthinkable. Even if they must sail into the very mouth of hell, they will not stop until every stolen soul is free and every slaver dead or in chains. The weary heroes gird themselves for war, praying that hope and fury and the icy purity of their cause will be enough to see them through the darkness to come. The Retribution slices through the seething nebula, running lights winking like small, doomed stars. Above them, around them, the hungry void presses close, shot through with strange lights and half-glimpsed shapes that gibber and writhe in the periphery of thought. But they do not falter. They have stared into blacker abysses and come through scathed but unbroken. They have freed the forsaken. They will break any chains. Hold course and speed, Captain Tanaka says from her command chair, silhouetted against the eerie light of the viewing port. We have a reckoning to deliver. The Antares Nebula writhed and seethed around the Retribution like a living thing, a maelstrom of swirling gas shot through with eldritch light. The ship forged ahead through the tumult, shields shimmering as they repelled the lashing tendrils of ionized plasma. On the bridge, Captain Lena Tanaka gripped the arms of her command chair, knuckles white. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, to flee this haunted abyss. But she silenced them with the memory of shattered bodies and shattered lives, of the cold equation they now served. No more stolen children. No more chains. Whatever the cost. At the tactical station, Sergeant Zach Reynolds watched the readouts flicker and pulse, the hairs on his neck prickling. The nebula interfered with their sensors, clouding the path ahead. They were flying blind into the Dragon's Maw. Steady as she goes, he said, as much to himself as the white-faced helm officer. Those pirate bastards are out there somewhere. We'll flush them out. As if summoned by his words, an alarm wailed across the bridge. Contact, the sensor officer barked. Multiple signatures, bearing 187 Mark 43. They're big, sir. Capital class. Sound General Quarters, Lena snapped. All hands to battle stations. Bring the weapon systems online. Crimson light bathed the bridge as klaxons blared. Crewmen rushed to their posts with the tight, focused movements of those who had stared into the abyss too long. On the main view screen, the swirling clouds of the nebula parted like a curtain to reveal their foe. A ragged armada of ships hung against the curdled stars, a motley assembly of converted freighters, salvaged warships, and stranger, spikier shapes that made the eye ache to behold them. And dominating them all was a vast construction of jagged metal and pulsing lights, more orbital fortress than spacecraft. Zach's breath caught as he recognized the spindly, skeletal shapes of shipyard gantries jutting from its pitted hull. There, he breathed. Their lair. We're being hailed, the comm officer reported, voice strangled. On screen. Lena's jaw clenched as the transmission resolved. A cruel, angular face filled the screen, pale eyes glinting with cold amusement in a frame of ritual scars. When it spoke, its voice was the rasp of a dull blade over bone. Little lost lambs, it crooned. Little lost lambs, strayed so far from the shepherd. Have you come to join my flock? Lena surged to her feet, chin held high. This is Captain Lena Tanaka of the Earth Empire Starship Retribution. You are in violation of every law and treaty of civilized space. Heave to and prepare to be boarded. The pirate lord threw back his head and laughed, a hideous, mocking sound. Such fire. Such spirit. I will greatly enjoy quenching it. His grin stretched too wide, shark-like. I am Karzan Bale, the Void King. I offer you this choice but once, kneel and be made slaves unto the cauldron eternal, or perish and be rendered unto the void. Choose quickly, little lambs. Zack slammed a fist on his console. We choose to send you screaming to whatever hell spawned you, butcher. Bale shook his head in mock sorrow. Ah, ever the way of it. Then let us dance the only dance that matters. The transmission cut to swirling static. A heartbeat later, the enemy fleet surged forward, disgorging waves of strike craft like angry hornets from a kicked nest. Evasive maneuvers. Lena barked. Concentrate fire on the shipyards. We have to take them out. The Retribution shuddered as a salvo of missiles hammered her shields. Consoles sparked and crew cried out as the bridge rattled and juddered. Shields at 60%. Zack called over the chaos. Hull breaches on decks 4 and 7. Keep firing. Tactical, what's the status of those shipyards? Reading fluctuations in their power core. I think we. A blast wider than the heart of a star blazed across the view screen. The pirate shipyards unfolded like a satanic flower, great rift of nothingness yawning at its heart. And then the Retribution was elsewhere, somewhen, elsehow. The nebula, the pirate fleet, all were gone, replaced by an infinite vista of shifting geometries and maddening light. Where? When? What? Zack clung to his console as the awful sense of dislocation threatened to turn him inside out. Nav, he croaked. Get us out of here. Can't, the navigation officer wailed. There's nowhere to go. It's all around us. Then, as suddenly as it began, stillness. The beyond receded, the laws of a sane universe reasserting themselves with a palpable snap. Zack raised his head, blinking through eyes that wept bloody tears. The view screen showed a gentle green curve beneath an achingly familiar blue sky. Ships slid through the orbital lanes, sunlight glinting off their hulls. We're home, someone ventured. Earth, Lena whispered. We're in the heart of the Empire. That's impossible. We were. Comms chimed, the sound shockingly mundane after the cosmic madness. Lena nodded jerkily for the channel to be opened. Admiral Vosson's craggy face filled the screen, consternation and relief warring on his features. Retribution. Where the hell have you been? We thought you lost with all hands. Admiral. Lena faltered. How? I don't understand. We were in Antares sector. Engaging a pirate fleet. There was a. She trailed off, the words turning to ashes on her tongue. Vosson frowned. Captain, you've been gone for 6 months. You missed your last 3 check-ins. We assumed the worst. 6 months. Half a year, lost in the blink of an eye. Lena looked to Zack, saw her own vertiginous shock mirrored in his eyes. Sir, she managed. I think we need to talk. The tales spilled out of them in fragmented pieces aboard Vosson's flagship, the hunt for the slavers, the Antares ambush, the otherworldly void that had spat them out above Earth with no memory of the passage. Through it all, Vosson listened, expression cycling from disbelief to horror to grim acceptance. When they were done, he sat back, seeming to age a decade before their eyes. I believe you, he said at last. As insane as it sounds. I believe you. He gestured to a sealed folder on his desk, a single word stamped across it in lurid red, abyss. You're not the first to encounter these phenomena at the edge of the gray zone. But command has suppressed the reports, buried the evidence. An enemy that can twist space and time itself. The panic would be unimaginable. What do we do, sir? Zack asked hoarsely. I'm grouping a task force. The best ships and crews in the quadrant. We'll take the fight to this Void King, in force this time. And you'll lead them, Captain. Lena stirred. I'm not sure we're ready for that, Admiral. My crew. I know what I'm asking. But there's no one else I trust for this. You've seen the abyss, Lena. You know what's at stake. We need you. Slow nods around the compartment, grim and resolute. They had started this road. They would see it through to whatever end. In the sickbay, Enro woke screaming from a nightmare of ashen skies and grasping shadows. Euron was there, as he always was, holding her as she shook and shuddered. The terror receded, but never entirely. It would be her constant companion, she knew, unto the end of days. As would the need to see the job done, the chains broken, whatever the cost. They had taken something from her in the cauldron, some core of innocence that could never be replaced. But they had given her something too, a mission, a calling. A reckoning. In the depths of the grey zone, Curzon Bale brooded on his basalt throne, pale eyes hooded and distant. The little lambs had bloodied him, far more than he had expected. There would be a response. There always was, when the civilized peoples felt their precious order threatened. Let them come. They would break upon his cauldron like all the rest, swallowed by the glorious void that was his true master. And their screams would echo forever, a sweet sacrament. In forgotten space lanes and nameless stars, the ships mustered, the retribution at their head, scorched but unbowed. They turned their bows to the rising dark, resolute and unflinching. The road ahead was cloaked in shadow, thick with doubt and dread. But they would walk it, nevertheless. For the lost. For the fallen. For the flame of justice, burning bright against the void. The end.